Hey, this is Ian again. So, in this episode, we're going to be getting into chapter 3 of Reluctant Regent, and this is going to be one where we have one of the most epic confrontations that I talk about in this book. This is even worse than some of the big battles we talk about in a couple of chapters. So, let me go ahead and share my screen, and I'll go ahead and jump right into it since I've got you guys all riled up for it. Okay, this is chapter 3, Reluctant Regent. The epic battle of Lamb's Rebuke. We soon left the fertile farmlands and forests of the central kingdom, following the trade road as it climbed into the grass-covered hills of the northern provinces. The weather became cooler, and an icy rain regularly drizzled down on our small band, although that did little to dampen Kells' spirits. She walked beside the wagon, chattering cheerfully to Minir, who didn't seem to mind, even though he only ever responded with non-committal grunts. Or she sang romantic songs whenever the mood took her. I, on the other hand, spent my days on Moose, huddled miserably in my oiled cloak as he placidly plodded along behind the wagon. Traffic on the road got sparse, and we spent more time sleeping under the wagon than we did in the now infrequent inns. I woke up one particularly chilly morning to find Kells choking a deer that had wandered into our camp. So at least we ate well, and both Minir and the assassin didn't seem to mind cooking. This meant that I took over cleaning the dishes after our meals and helping out with the horses, but I didn't mind. A few weeks went by as we slowly made our way through the hills until one afternoon we passed a worn granite post that marked the border of the ancient province of Sheepland. We continued north under dreary skies, and the grass became sparse, replaced by low-growing green briar bushes. And soon we began seeing herds of the now infamous black sheeplander sheep grazing amongst the rocky hills. But we saw no shepherds. I later learned that both the people of Sheepland and the sheep themselves valued their privacy, so this actually wasn't that unusual. The only sound as we traveled further into this desolate province was the cold wind and the clomp of our horses' hooves on the paving stones of the road. The sheep watched expressionlessly as we passed, standing perfectly still, quietly chewing their cud as they thought whatever deep thoughts sheep have in their dim, sheepy brains. I was worried that Moose would take umbrage at this attention, but thankfully he only gave one incurious glance and then ignored them for the rest of the trip. Finally, at mid-afternoon on the 10th day of our journey, we crested a steep hill and looked down at the great northern metropolis of Lamb's Rebuke. The small town was surprisingly picturesque, consisting of a number of whitewashed stone buildings with red tile roofs, all clustered around a steep-sided bay. A large, low-slung building that looked like a tavern was down by the shore. A couple of sturdy oak piers provided anchorage for a few small fishing boats that scuttled industriously around the bay, pulling up silvery finfish in their nets. A narrow channel between two granite outcroppings led to the wind-tossed waves of the great northern sea, and the few townspeople I saw walking about the cobblestone streets seemed well clothed and fed, not anything like the slovenly, dim-witted hill folk I had expected to find. Small rocky hill overlooked the town to my left, and on top of it was perched the northernmost stronghold of the formerly great House Caldor. It didn't look like much, just a 10-foot high crenellated granite wall with a gatehouse, which was lacking a gate, and a squat tower on one end that stood half again as high as the wall. A faded, tattered gray banner depicting what could charitably be called the winged minotaur fluttered on top of the tower in the cold breeze, and I couldn't see anybody on the battlements. I assumed there was a garrison, although there didn't appear to be much garrisoning going on at the moment. This is such a nice town, Kells said. What a beautiful bay, and look at all those fish. Can we go down to the ocean and look for shells? I've never been to the ocean, and I've always wanted to see it. Pretty please? She batted her eyelashes at me and gave me her best winsome smile. Maybe later, Kells, I responded. Right now I need to go in and check on the garrison, and I want to get out of this wind. I also need to see where their library is so we can start unpacking these books. Minir frowned at the empty walls and grunted in agreement. Then he flicked the reins and started down the track that led around the town to the fortress. Kells pouted for a moment, but then she brightened and skipped happily after the wagon, her momentary disappointment forgotten. I gave Moose a polite nudge and followed. We arrived at the gateless gatehouse after a few minutes, but nobody challenged us, and it appeared, in fact, that the entire garrison was either asleep, drunk, or daydreaming. And although I could certainly sympathize with them, that didn't speak highly of their professionalism. We came across a soldier who was sleeping on a hammock strung between the gateless gateposts, his snores echoing eerily in the dim passage. A rusty helmet covered his face, and a spear leaned against the wall next to him. Minir stopped the horses, and for a moment we stood silently in front of the strangely effective barrier. I cleared my throat. Excuse me. Excuse me. I'm Matthias of House Caldor, and I'm here to take over the administration of the province and the garrison. Could you please move aside and take me to the commander? I had my signet ring and everything. I waved the heavy golden ring at him. The only response was an even louder snore and some incoherent muttering. After a second, Minir snorted irritably and got down from the wagon. He walked up to the peacefully slumbering soldier and, with one smooth jerk, upended the hammock, dumping our sleepy friend onto the hard paving stones. He hit with a solid thud and a yowl of pained outrage, and his helmet bounced off, rolling into the courtyard beyond. The guard boiled to his feet, his fist cocked back, and his unshaven face mottled with rage. He was a short, thin man with a sallow complexion, crooked yellow teeth, and he smelled as if he had only a brief, very brief familiarity with the basics of personal hygiene. That's it, you fool. I will show you just how. His voice trailed off as he found himself staring at Minrir's broad chest. His gaze slowly traveled upwards until it reached Minrir's somberly expressionless face. Yes? Minir asked politely. What will you show us? Just how glad I am to see you, the man said. He glanced at the rest of our party and licked his thin lips nervously. What can old Barstow help you fine folk with? Hello, Mr. Barstow, Kells said, giving him a friendly wave. It's time to go wakey wakey. Thank you. Barstow, was it? I said, giving her an irritated glance. As I mentioned, I'm Matthias of House Caldor, and I'm here to take command of the garrison in the province. I need to speak to your commander, please. I waved the signet ring at him again in hopes of prompting a semblance of professionalism, but I failed. He looked blankly at me for a moment. We have a commander? That's news to me, it is. Wait, you don't have a commander? I said incredulously. Well, who's in charge then? We's more of a group type of folk here. Nobody says what to do unless everybody says to do it. We's collectivist. He pronounced the last word so proudly and carefully that I knew at once that he hadn't come up with it and probably had no idea what it meant. Well, how does anything get done then? I asked, like cooking, patrolling, and such. Well, we don't patrol on account of not oppressing the people. And we have meetings and such for the other things. Lots and lots of meetings. I was at a loss. How could there be a garrison with no commander? I'd heard of collectives in Admini, but they were concentrated around merchant guilds and the arts, where, as far as I knew, they worked well enough. But I couldn't see how a committee would lend itself to fighting off rangers. I glanced at my companions to see if they had any insights to offer. Minir just gave a tiny shrug, and Kells had wandered off to examine a flowering bush by the side of the road, so it looked like I was on my own. I thought for a moment. So, you have meetings, yes? Yep, plenty of them, Barstow said proudly. Well, who decides when to have these meetings? That'd be Darren, he replied. He's the coordinatorian. Okay, then, that's progress, I said triumphantly. Please take me to this Darren person. Well, I don't know, Barstow said. That's something we should probably have a meeting on. Minir cleared his throat. Barstow hurriedly continued. But since Darren has to call them, you're right. We're going to go talk to him. Come with me. I dismounted and told Moose, wait here and don't bite anyone unless they attack us. He snorted in horseous amusement and began grazing on the flowering bush Kells was looking at. I beckoned to her, and the three of us followed Barstow through the courtyard to the tower. A ramshackle thatch roofed stable stood to the left, a weedy garden to the right, and a rickety wooden staircase led up to the ramparts, where I saw a couple of guards in worn leathers sleeping. Otherwise, the entire fortress seemed almost abandoned. We arrived at the tower, and it, unlike the gatehouse, actually had a door. It was made of heavy oak studded with iron nails and was propped open with a barrel full of what looked like gravel and broken masonry tools. We entered and came to a large room which took up the entire first floor of the tower. There were bunks shoved against the wall and a fireplace on the far side, with a curving staircase beside it, which went up to the second level. A large group of soldiers was lazing about the place, playing dice or sleeping, and a plump, well-dressed man was writing in a ledger at a table by the smoky fire. Barstow went up to the man at the table and stood diffidently for a moment. Mr. Coordinatorian, sir, there's some people here for you. Without looking up from his ledger, the man said, Mr. Barstow, you know the procedure for this, yes? Why didn't you submit a meeting request? Yes, sir. Yes, sir, I do. And sorry I didn't do that, Barstow said. But look at him. He gestured at Minir. Darren stopped writing and looked up, then did a double take when he saw Minir standing behind his sweating minion, his arms folded, looking sternly reasonable. The dice game in the corner clattered to a halt. I stepped forward into the sudden silence and said, Greetings! You'd be Darren, I assume, the commander of the garrison? I'm Matthias of House Caldor, and I'm here to take command and assume the administration of the province. I waved the signet ring at him. I kept expecting it to magically start moving the proceedings along, what with it being the official symbol of House Caldor's authority and all, but it seemed strangely ineffective. Now, the lesson I learned from this exchange was that symbols of authority only work if everybody recognizes your authority. And the best way to get them to do that is to have someone like Minir standing behind you. Now, if the situation is dire enough, you can even bring in someone like Kells to sort things out, but that tends to get messy and inevitably leads to a much higher body count. I think we give far too much weight to symbols, not enough to the implicit threat of violence action which is behind them. I see, Darren said, clearly not seeing anything, or at least anything he liked. He leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers under his double chin. For a moment, everybody looked at each other, and the silence quickly got awkward, so I continued. So, we'll need a place to bunk, stabling for our horses, and, oh yeah, a report on any major problems you've encountered with the locals. Any raiding. Oh, and we also need a copy of the budget, things like that. The silence stretched even longer. So I pulled out the last verbal trick that I knew, one which I had read was guaranteed to convince anyone of military rank of my good intentions. Thank you for your service, I smiled. It didn't work. Darren frowned at me, then said, This is highly irregular, Mr. Caldor, even if you are of House Caldor. Highly irregular. I cannot in good conscience remove myself from command of the garrison until I've received, in triplicate, a provincial authority transfer form from the High Clerk in Admini. Until then, I must ask you to leave the premises as your presence is compromising the security of the fortress. Good day, sir. He sat back and resumed reading his ledger. Clearly, he considered the matter resolved. Now, I'll admit, I was momentarily stymied by his master-level response. Shuttling people back and forth between various offices to get forms is a highly effective way for bureaucrats to avoid work. And it's one that is difficult to counter unless, of course, you have a larger bureaucratic organization on your side. Now, usually the best response is to set these organizations against each other, and while they're flailing around and engaging in endless form wars, you can sometimes sneak in and get whatever you need done without either organization being the wiser. I, unfortunately, had nobody except for a lowlander, an assassin, and a demonic horse, so it seemed we had reached an impasse. And I'd only even been here a few moments. Things were looking grim. And then I noticed a piece of parchment on the table that had provincial authority transfer form written across the top and what looked like Cyrene's neat signature at the bottom. What's that then? I asked, pointing at the form. He glanced down and calmly shoved the PATF under his ledger. It isn't relevant to our discussion, Mr. Caldor, because even if it was a provincial authority transfer form, which I assure you it is not, it isn't in triplicate, and so, therefore, isn't valid. You'll need to return to Admini and get the proper authorization before we can proceed. I am most sorry, but there's nothing I can do without 3 copies of the PATF. My hands are tied, he smiled blandly. But you have the form right there, I said, desperately. All you have to do is move your ledger 3 inches to the left. It's not in triplicate, sir, he replied, an evil glint rising in his eye. So clearly it can't be a PATF or relevant to our conversation. I just can't help you. Why do you even need it in triplicate? It's not like anybody but you and I need or want to file it, right? Who gets the 3rd copy? Do you even know? Why isn't 1 copy enough? I know, we could share. Can't do that. It's against policy, he replied, sitting back with a satisfied smirk on his wide, fleshy face. I slumped in defeat. I didn't want to start another months-long trek down the trade road to Admini, dodging assassins and bounty hunters the whole way, just to get 2 more copies of a damn form that was literally sitting on a table 2 feet from me. But I also didn't see how I had a choice. Fighting him was like fighting a large, gelatinous boulder. Every time I tried a solid argument, he simply oozed over it, slowly sapping its energy and momentum until he had safely trapped it in a hellish bureaucratic morass from which there was no escape. Dodging swords was easier than this. Darren was, and still is, the most evil, despicable foe that I have ever faced, and his bland, broad face and weirdly colorless eyes still haunt my dreams on occasion. I tried again. So, if I get the forms, you'll transfer administrative control? He slowly considered. No, that will just allow us to begin planning the transition process. We'll need to create a strategic plan for the province and convene multiple working groups to address issues like back taxes, staffing levels for the garrison, and changes in the tariff rates on wool. And once we've done that, we can start the planning process for creating meetings so that you can get up to speed on the various duties a provincial administrator has. Oh, and we'll need to have a separate but parallel process for military matters, of course. He smiled broadly, an oddly moose-like gleam in his eyes. Minir scratched his chin, then sighed heavily and strode around the table. Before Darren could react, he palmed the pudgy man's face and pulled him to his feet. Is that the fastest way to the battlements? He asked Barstow, inclining his chin towards the stairs in the corner of the room. Wide-eyed, Barstow nodded, and Minir dragged the squawking commander upstairs. I gave the astounded soldiers an apologetic shrug, grabbed the PATF to ease the negotiations I'm sure were coming, and followed. Goodbye, nice soldiers, Kells said, waving as she skipped lightly up the stairs after me. We'll be back soon. Don't be naughty. By the time Kells and I got upstairs, Minir had dragged Darren through a door leading outside and was dangling him by his face over the edge of the wall. Talk to him now, Minir grunted. Well, okay then. So this is the provincial authority transfer form signed by Cyrene, certified high clerk of Admini, correct? I waved the paper in front of Darren's now beet-red face. His eyes crossed for a moment as he studied it. Then he nodded. Well, in all honesty, he tried to nod, but since Minir was still holding his face, he really couldn't. Instead, he made a strange eye roll, which I took for assent. I continued. Now, I'm aware that there's only one copy, I said, and that makes me sad, because even though I love and respect forms, especially forms in triplicate, I simply don't have the time or energy to travel back to Admini to get the other two I need. Does that make you sad? More jerky eye rolls, and I saw a fat tear running down his cheek. Clearly, this was a heartbreaking topic for him, as it was for all of us. I feigned thought for a moment. Then I snapped my fingers. I have a solution. Now, we clearly can't go get more copies of a form that's already right in front of us, but my good friend Minir here can just hit you until you see triple. Then you'll see 3 PATFs and can sign off on the transfer, and then be on your way. It's brilliant. Don't you agree? Judging from the strangled, gabbing sounds coming from Darren's mouth, he either thought it was indeed a brilliant idea or he was getting overly emotional. So I proceeded. So, just to follow protocol, I need to ask again. How many copies of the PATF do you see? Darren looked at me, then blinked 3 times. My goodness gracious, I said, looking at the form with astonished wonder. It magically replicated itself, Minir. Now we have enough copies of the PATF to proceed. Oh, what a happy day! Kells clapped her hands delightedly and gave a squeal of joy. I think you can put him down now, I told Minir. I believe our planning session is over. Minir nodded and carefully put Darren down by the edge of the wall. The pudgy man stood gasping for a moment, his hands on his knees. Then he looked up at us, his face suffused with rage. You didn't follow protocol, he shrieked. Face grabbing and hitting in no way, shape, or form substitutes for certified authority transfer procedures, and I highly progress the improper. Trailed off as Kells walked up to him. Can you fly? She asked sweetly. What? Was all he got out before she poked him once on his forehead. He balanced precariously on the wall's edge for a moment, his arms flailing like a spasmodic, overweight chicken, and then he slowly toppled backwards. A few moments later, he hit the ground with a dull thud, and I rushed over, peering down to see if, against all odds, he had somehow managed to hit something softer than a paving stone. He had not. Darren was lying in the courtyard, clearly dead, looking like a sad, deflated potato, with not a form in sight to ease his way into the afterlife. I turned to Kells. Why did you do that? I asked, accusingly. We'd already won. If we protested, all we had to do was have Minir hit him until he saw triplicate, and we'd have been in the clear. Sorry, Kells said absently. He was silly and mean. Then she wandered off, her attention caught by a yellow butterfly fluttering around the battlements. Minir frowned at her, then turned to me. We forgot to take minutes. And that is that chapter. I actually like that chapter because it's one where I start talking a lot about the things I've learned about bureaucracy. First one, I can't emphasize this enough. If you're having problems with the bureaucracy, see if you can find another larger bureaucracy to stick it on. And I can't guarantee that you'll ever get anything done, but at the very least, you can get them into a hissing contest and they'll spend all their time and energy, uh, fighting each other. And like I said, sometimes you can actually sort of sneak in and, call the help number, maybe get somebody else and get what you need while they're still fighting each other. Works really well. You can get like government agencies against each other. But quite frankly, best to avoid that situation if at all possible. But yeah, Darren was actually based on the idea of, and in a large organization, you're always going to get people that love to have meetings. And so that was kind of what he was representing. And they never get anything done. It's basically a meeting to have a meeting. In fact, I still remember this. I think I might have talked about this earlier. There was an administrator once in our organization that sent out a thing to our staff listserv about like, let's have a meeting to decide when we should have meetings. And I still remember thinking like, well, maybe we shouldn't have this one. So I don't know. It worked out. Um, but yeah, dealing with bureaucracies is like dealing with a large gelatinous boulder. I swear to God, um, so my advice to you is you need to spend the minimum amount of time dealing with these things. Read their webpage, read it like 5 times and make sure that you have um, every form, every bit of ID, everything like that before you go. Because the last thing bureaucrats like is when things don't go, according to the flow of what they're used to, because they don't want to think, they just want to check boxes. So if you go in and you've got like some ID that doesn't work, then you're making them think, and then it'll slow things down. But if you come in with everything even arranged in order and just present it to them, a lot of times you can get through it with as less fuss as possible. But yeah, avoid it if at all possible. That's my advice to you on that. But anyway, yeah, an epic battle in Lamb's Rebuke. Um, I think a couple days I'll probably do the next chapter. Because after I get done with reading this for the podcast, I'm gonna stop dealing with Reluctant Regent again. I think I've done enough with that book. But the next chapter, maybe I'll do that on Wednesday. It'll be when they meet the sheepish and they find out that there is a problem on the horizon that they're going to have to deal with. And that's that. So I hope you guys enjoyed the chapter and have a good day.